introduce Tom Osborne. And forgive me for my cold today, but I promise you it's not contagious. I'm past that stage. It's probably the toughest assignment I've had since I've had this job. How do you introduce Tom Osborne? So I thought I'd tell a little something that even Tom doesn't know about, but we had a connection in the past. And that was that some of you know I had a daughter who was a cheerleader at Nebraska. And I know Tom is used to red shirt, fifth-year people. I thought it was a 7-year red skirt. But she did finally graduate. But after Renee had graduated, she also worked for the university. And she was, and then also the mentor and an advisor to the Yell Squad. And if you remember, a few years ago, there was a tragedy down there where one of the young ladies who was a cheerleader severely injured her neck and was paralyzed from the neck down, and doing much better today. But the reason for telling that is Renee was at the hospital, of course, because she, excuse me, she was the advisor at that time. And the first person who came to the hospital from the university administrative side in the athletic department was Tom Osborne for that cheerleader. To not only comfort the family, but also to comfort the rest of the Yell Squad, as you can imagine how they felt at that time. So I tell you that story only that when Tom backs a program like he's going to talk to you about today, in teamwork and mentoring, that it is not done except out of the graciousness and the honesty of his house, his heart, that he supports such a program. And so it's very difficult for me to say I'd like to introduce Tom, a elect representative to the House of Representatives and the next coach, but to ask you to welcome Tom Osborne, a very gracious and sincere person who backs this program sincerely. Tom.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're really, really pleased that you give us a few minutes to talk to you, because I know your time is valuable. First of all, I'd like to introduce just a few people who are involved with teammates. First of all, my wife, Nancy, and maybe you can, if you want to applaud them, but do it after I, no. Wait till, I've got about 5 people to introduce. I'll introduce them all, and then you can applaud if you want. But Nancy has been very helpful in organizing teammates, been very supportive of a lot of things that I've done. Also, Tom Miller is in charge of the teammates program with Omaha Public Schools. Kristen Flott has been working with teammates in Greater Omaha. Then a couple guys have really been very helpful to us up here. Denny Walker, who has done a lot of fundraising. John Shuley, who has done a lot of work with us and has been helping us in terms of our bookkeeping. So we really have some excellent people working with us. We have some other board members here this morning. But first of all, I see a little gray hair around the room. I've got a little bit myself. And when I got out of coaching, one of the things that I was really looking forward to was spend some time with my grandchildren. And I know a lot of you here probably have some grandchildren. And it's been a little harder than I thought it was going to be. The other day, my grandson came up to me and said, "Grandpa," he said, "make a noise like a frog." And I was kind of surprised, and I said, "Croak, croak." And he was happy enough. I thought it was a terrible imitation, but he was satisfied. And so pretty soon he was just turned 8. And I heard him talking to my granddaughter, his sister, who was 4, and he was telling her that it wouldn't be long before they'd be going to Disneyland. And I called him over and I said, "Well, what's this about going to Disneyland? I hadn't heard anything about it." He says, "Yeah," he said, "Mom always says when Grandpa croaks, we're going to go to Disneyland." So I can see that I can tell a lot of you are grandparents out there. Well, just very quickly, I'll try to be fairly brief. And they say, well, what are you doing here? I think I can best explain that by relating a study that I ran across not too long ago. There was a study done in the Fullerton, California public schools in 1940, and they asked the teachers in the public schools in 1940 in California what their major concerns were, what were the problems that they were seeing. Number one problem was talking in class, number two was chewing gum, number three was not putting waste paper in a waste paper basket, number four was getting out of turn in line when they went from one class to another. So somebody noticed this more recently and decided they'd go back into the Fullerton, California public schools and ask the same question. So they did. They said, what are some of the main problems that you're seeing? And the problems had changed somewhat. The list was different. And so the number one concern was assault. Secondly was gangs. Third was drugs. Fourth was weapons, teenage suicide, dropout rates, teenage pregnancy, and so on and so on. And so you'd say, well, what in the world happened to us? You know, this 1940, if you're young, it seems like a long time ago. But if your age, some of us are here today, it doesn't seem so long ago. And it's a huge change in a period of 50, 60 years. And most of those changes actually have taken place in the last 25 or 30 years. And I guess they parallel some of the things that I saw in coaching, because over 36 years of coaching, I saw some drastic changes in the young people we were working with and the environments that they came from. And so I guess as I think about this, I would probably say that there are three things that have occurred to me that may have related to this transition, this change from what we saw in the Fullerton, California public schools in 1940 and what we're seeing today with some of our young people. And the first thing that has changed rather drastically and remarkably has been our family structure. When I first started recruiting back in the early 1960s, we would occasionally see someone from a single-parent family. And if so, it was usually because one parent or the other was deceased. But it wouldn't be over 5 or 10%. Today, over half of the young people that we went out and recruited were from single parents. Over 50% of the young people in our country today are growing up without both biological parents. And again, that change mostly has occurred in the last 25, 30 years. Currently, there are 18 million fatherless young people in our country. And I guess I dealt with some of those, and you know, in most cases, they never knew their dad, never saw him. And so if your dad doesn't care enough about you to stick around to even see what you look like, it leaves a hole in your life. It leaves somewhat of a vacuum in your psyche. And you're always trying to plug that hole with something, and usually it's the wrong stuff. And so I saw up close and personal firsthand what the family instability that we're experiencing in our country is doing to our young people. And then secondly, I think you realize that sometimes, even though you've done a great job as a parent, and even though the situation is about as good as it could be, when a young person gets to be around 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, they begin to think they're a little bit more independent, and they begin to pull away a little bit. By the time they're 15 or 16 or 17, they think they've got all the answers, and they think they're bulletproof, and they don't need anybody to give them any advice. And so somewhere in there between 11 and 16 or 17, the environment that young people are in becomes more and more important. And as parents and as grandparents, we begin to lose control. And so some things have happened in our environment, too, I think, that have made a difference. We're currently the most violent nation in the world for young people, between ages 14 to 24, in terms of homicide and suicide. And second place is not even close. So the violence factor has really escalated. And I guess I saw that rather graphically between 1985 and 1995. We had 7 players who at one time or another have been on our football team. They maybe were walk-ons, they might not have played much. But 7 players who had been there. Between 1985 and 1995, we had 7 players who were shot. 2 of them were shot fatally. You say, well, you must have gone out and recruited a bunch of thugs, didn't you? And the answer is no. None of these guys were armed. None of them were doing anything illegal. They were simply standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the remarkable thing about that was that prior to 1985, in the 23 years I'd been at Nebraska prior to 1985, I could not remember one case of any young person being the victim of a shooting incident. And so the violence factor has certainly escalated. I think most of you are concerned and aware of the fact that drugs and alcohol have become a bigger and bigger problem. And probably the major drug problem is one that maybe you're not as concerned about as you should be, because at the present time, 40% of our young people aged 13, 14, 15 are binge drinking. And when you start drinking alcohol and binge drinking at that age, it's a whole different ballgame because of psychological and physiological maturity. And so you find, statistically, that of that 40% will become alcoholics, and that's 16%. And oftentimes it happens very quickly. It doesn't take 3 and 4 and 5 years like it does when you're 25, 26, 27. Sometimes it just takes a matter of weeks. And of course you're all aware of methamphetamines, cocaine, crack, marijuana, and so on. And so the drug issue has really become huge. And then the third thing that I think has really impacted our young people that's out there in the environment is the issue of the media. I guess as a coach you always want to hit back at the media. I took my hits over the years, and I don't want to blame them for anything, but if you think about it, the average young person by the time they're 21 years of age has seen between 1 and 2 years, not of television, but by age 21 they've seen between 1 and 2 years of commercials. And so if you've seen between 1 and 2 years of commercials on television, it's obviously made some impact on your value system. And so if you watch the commercials and you watch the ads and you listen to some of the music and you watch some of the movies, you realize that there are certain messages that keep coming through. And one of the messages that I think our young people are getting consistently is the idea that things will make you happy. You know, when you're a young guy or a young girl, certain kind of tennis shoes, certain kind of jacket, certain kind of bicycle. If you can just have that, you know, then you'll be satisfied. Then you get a little bit older, and it's a certain kind of car, and a certain kind of clothes. And you get a little older, and it's a certain kind of job, and it's a certain kind of house, and a certain kind of income, and a certain kind of security, and you can plug in all the gaps. But the point is that we're steadily telling our young people that things will make you happy. And I guess most of us in this room have lived long enough to realize that's not true. It's really a deception. Things really don't make you happy. Secondly, I think young people are being taught consistently that promiscuity is acceptable, it's common, and nobody gets hurt. And so roughly 95% of the events that you see on television, movies, and so on that have to do with sex, 95% are extramarital. And so promiscuity is held up as something that really is harmless. And yet I guess as I sat across the desk from young men over 36 years and dealt with some of their problems, I came to realize that promiscuity always diminishes, but there are consequences, and an awful lot of the time the consequences are irreversible. And so again, I think our young people are being deceived. And of course, we talked about the alcohol, we talked about the violence, and so the messages that our young people are receiving really have been very damaging. And so I don't want to make you just feel terrible. You may, by now you probably say, well, I wish this guy had never come. You know, I'm feeling awful about things. But the reason I'm mentioning these things to you is that unless you work in the schools, unless you have firsthand acquaintance with fairly large numbers of young people, the average person our age doesn't really have a full grasp of what's going on or how serious it is. And so what I'm trying to do is outline the problem for you. And so you say, well, that's great, but what are you going to do about it? And I guess in coaching, that was what I was always interested in. I wasn't too interested in people to tell me what was wrong. So I had a whole lot of folks tell me what was wrong. But I was more interested in finding somebody who would tell me what we're going to do about it, you know. And so one thing that will work is mentoring. And this is what I want to spend the next 5 minutes talking to you about. Mentoring is something that we have found is a solution And there are some numbers to go with it. Character Counts has done some studies, and they found that a good mentoring program will cut down absenteeism from school and dropout rates by close to 50%. Will cut drug and alcohol abuse by 40 to 50%, teenage pregnancy by about 40%, and violence and crime by 30 to 40%. And there's nothing else that we know of, given the present situation, given the situation we have in front of us, that is anywhere near as effective. And so we have found that mentoring is critical. And you may say, well, what is mentoring? And I think, probably to me at least, mentoring represents three things. One is affirmation. You'd be amazed at how many young people we have, and maybe even some of the kids that you deal with, maybe your grandchildren, maybe others that you know, really don't have anyone who says, you know, I really believe in you. You know, I really care about you. You know, you're okay. And so the messages that they get one way or another at school, at home, really are not affirming at all. And so when you don't have affirmation, things begin to go downhill very quickly. And I guess I saw this very, very clearly in our situation with our football team. If you told a player often enough that he wasn't going to be very good, that you didn't think he had the talent to play, that you just didn't think he was going to work out, it wouldn't be long before he would play down to that level of expectation. And it wouldn't be long before he would play so poorly, he would usually be demoted or leave the team. And on the other hand, if you said, you know, I really believe in you, you know, I really see some great possibilities here. We think that down the road, you're going to be a great player. You have great potential. It wouldn't be long before they would begin to take that affirmation and they would run with it, and they become players that they didn't even know they could become. And so affirmation, I don't care at what level, what age, is critical. You need to be affirmed. And most of our young people, at least a high percentage, are not being affirmed on a regular basis. Secondly, an awful lot of our young people don't have an anchor in their life. They do not have an adult or more than one adult who they can count on. That when that adult tells them something, that they're going to visit school, they're going to attend an athletic event, that they're going to give them a birthday present, they will follow through. You know, so often they're disappointed. So often they're let down. And so a mentor is someone who is stable, someone who you can count on, who says, I'm going to be there, and I don't have any axe to grind. You know, I'm not a parent, I'm not a grandparent, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a preacher. There's nothing in it for me, but I care enough about you that I'm going to show up, and I'm going to be there every week or twice a week or whatever the deal is, and I will not let you down. And that's a very powerful thing in the life of a young person, because many of them have never experienced that before in their lifetime. Let me just tell you a very quick story about a case like this. Out in North Platte, there was a mentor and a mentee, and the mentor wasn't seemingly getting through to the young person he was mentoring. The young guy just came in there and sat, and the guy would talk, and he would ask him questions, and he wouldn't get much response. And this went on week after week and month after month. And finally the mentor thought, well, you know, maybe there's something I can do that will help. The mentor played a guitar. And so he said, how would you like to take some guitar lessons? And the young guy said, okay. And he said, I'd like to do that. So he began to learn to play the guitar a little bit. And then the mentor said, you know what, if you get your grades up, I'll give you this guitar. And so the guy began to do a little bit better, and the guy gave him the guitar. And then some time went by, and then the guy's grades went down again, and finally the mentor said, well, you know, the deal was that you're going to, in order to earn this guitar, you're going to have to make your grade, so I'm going to have to take it back. And he said, and furthermore, you know, we've been together now for about a year, and nothing much has happened, and I really don't think I can reach you. I don't think as a mentor I'm doing you any good. And so I think that probably what we need to do is see if somebody else can do a better job. So the young guy didn't say much. He just gave the guitar back, and the guy took the guitar home, put it in the closet, and didn't see the guy for a couple of weeks. And then he thought, well, I'm getting the guitar out and play it. He got it out, and when he opened it up, the note fell out. And he opened it up, read it, and the note said, don't give up on me. So the point is that the young guy, even though nothing much seemed to be happening, had really appreciated the fact that here was someone who was constant. Here was someone who would show up. Here was someone who cared enough, even though there weren't a lot of sparks flying and there wasn't a whole lot going on in the relationship. It was very meaningful to that young person. And so the guy went back and he reestablished that relationship, and then things began to happen. And then the third thing I'd say that a mentor is someone who has some vision. Because an awful lot of our young kids, if you think about it, have never seen anybody maybe that gets up and goes to work every day, have never seen a father figure, don't know anybody who went to college. And so their idea of the future is wait until they're 16 when they can drop out of school and they get a job at Burger King and McDonald's and make minimum wage, maybe buy an old car, and that's what life is all about. And so if you have somebody can say, you know, I think you can do better than that. I see some potential. I see some things that you could be. And right now you don't even know maybe what those are. And so I got a guy that I've been mentoring now for 4 years. And this young guy is from a very large family. Had a brother in prison, father died, stepfather died. And so his vision of maybe the best he could do is maybe drop out of school at age 16. And so he didn't go to school much. He got kicked out of school. He got kicked out of another school. But finally somebody came to me and said, oh, I don't think this is working. I think they were politely trying to tell me I wasn't a very good mentor. And they said, we'll get you somebody else. And I said, no, you know, I made a commitment to this particular guy. And I'm going to stay with him until he tells me he doesn't want to see me anymore or until I die. And so we stuck together. And along about the 2.5, 3-year mark, something began to change. I don't know what it was, but he didn't get kicked out of any more schools. And his grades were not great, but he began to pass some classes, and that was great. And he began to participate in athletics. And he turned the corner. And I would say today that he's got a future. You know, I think he's going to be a Division I football player. I didn't know he could play football at all. I think he's going to be okay. And so the point is that you have to provide some vision. And then lastly, let me just say this. We're talking about teammates, which is one of many mentoring programs. And all we're doing is we're saying, okay, maybe you folks have got some ability. You know, you don't get to where you are, being retired from AT&T, Intel, without some talent. And so you've got something upstairs. You've got something going for you. And you also maybe have some time, and maybe you have some ability to make a contribution. And so what I would encourage you to do is think about this, because, you know, you can give some money to an organization, and you can build a building, and you can start a program, and all those things are great. But eventually, every one of those buildings will fall down, and those programs will disappear. But if you invest in the life of a young person, and you begin to make some changes in that young person then will become a different person, and that young person will begin to invest in somebody else. And so you begin to start something that will have a ring of immortality to it. There's no greater investment that you can make in a young person. So our mentoring program is 1 hour a week in the schools. Most anybody can spare 1 hour a week. And most all of you wring your hands and shake your head once in a while what you read in the papers about young people. And the question is, you know, what are we willing to do about it? You know, what are we willing to sacrifice? And so currently we're mentoring about 500 young people in Omaha, about 750 in Lincoln, roughly 2,000 to 2,500 around the state of Nebraska, and roughly 30, 35 school districts. And we'd like to take that to 60 school districts and 5,000 young people. We should be able to mentor close to 2,000 people in Omaha alone to make a dent. And if you do that, things will begin to change, and things will begin to happen. And so we do have some material, and if you'd like to follow through with a phone call, we would really appreciate that. And if you want to mentor in the Omaha Public Schools, you'll probably end up talking to Tom Miller. Probably talk to Kristen if you want to, in the greater Omaha area, Millard, Papillion, Bellevue, wherever. So wherever you live, we got a school near you, and we will do the very best we can for you. And it's a program that will make a difference. So my time is up. I really want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen today. We hope we have 200, 300, 400, maybe 500 mentors come out of this group. There's 1,600, 1,700 of you here. And if you did, that would make a huge impact in the Omaha area. So thank you for your attention, and I want to wish you the very best. Thank you.
I have a little gift for Tom here from Avaya, so he won't forget us.
Probably have, but on behalf of Avaya Communications, we'd like to present this nice travel bag for you, Tom, as well as a wonderful Avaya Communications cap. Wear it with pride.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna wear the cap and take this briefcase back to Washington, and I'm gonna give it to the new president, whoever he is.
I'd like to personally introduce you to, I know a lot of you have seen Kathy walking around here, but Kathy is the new liaison for the company and for pioneering as well, and I'd like to personally introduce her as Kathy Placek. Here she is.
Now we're getting to the good part, though. We're going to have the drawing from the teammates, and Mo, you can bring that up here, and we can pull some names out. Tom's going to come